In 1978, a night watchman was on a routine patrol in the Italian village of Torriglia when he allegedly had one of the most bizarre encounters with extraterrestrial beings that has been ever recorded. The Zanfretta UFO Incident. The 6th of December 1978 was a cold Wednesday, and late that evening, night watchman Pier Fortunato Zanfretta was on duty in the Torriglia area in the Genuese hinterland. The roads were very icy due to the weather being so cold, so Zanfretta was driving more cautiously than normal. When turning down onto the road that led to the center of the town, Zanfretta was facing the Casa Nostra villa, which was the home of a dentist named Torriglia. As he was driving, he would suddenly spot some lights in the direction of the villa. Thinking that thieves had broken into the property, Zanfretta would stop the car as soon as he was close enough to the villa. All the lights in the nearby area had gone out, leaving the area in complete darkness. Zanfretta would then grab his service pistol and his flashlight, get out of the car, and enter the villa. At some point, he decided to radio the station. Marshal Carlo Toccalino, who was on duty at the switchboard that night, would later say in an interview that Zanfretta had screamed, "They're not men, they're not men," on the radio when he contacted them before the radio suddenly cut off. Not only that, but people living in Torriglia would suddenly call in to report that they had seen a strange glow in the direction of the villa. The fact that the radio cut off like that alarmed Zanfretta's colleagues, so two of them, Walter Lauria and Raimondo Mascia, headed to the area to look for him, and they would find him about an hour later. Allegedly, his body was very warm to the touch, despite lying on the cold ground in the middle of winter. When he awoke, Zanfretta was apparently in a very confused state. In the story he would later tell the commander of the Torriglia station, Antonio Nucci, the following day, Zanfretta was creeping along the villa trying to find the would-be thieves, when he was surprised by someone appearing behind him, causing him to stumble. He then spun around and found himself face to face with an enormous being, around 3 meters tall. A being that Zanfretta described as having wavy skin, as if it was wrapped in a soft suit. It had gray and yellow triangle eyes, red veins on the head, pointed ears, and hands with long fingers and round nails. Zanfretta would then spot a sort of luminous disc that rose into the sky and flew away. The next day, when the Carabinieri investigated the report, they found a huge horseshoe-shaped footprint and a strange burn on the ground. There were reportedly also 52 or 56 reports made by the inhabitants of Torriglia that had also seen something strange in the sky that night. The official report tells a simplified story of the events that night. It does confirm that they did find a horseshoe-shaped print on the ground. And according to the report, there was an unidentified luminous flying object seen in the sky for a few moments. The conditions were very good, and the object was seen at an estimated altitude of 1,500 meters in a northeast direction. The report also mentions that Zanfretta was heading towards that location to investigate. But by the time he arrived at the villa, the lights had disappeared, and instead he would see an oval object that was red in color and very bright that appeared to be moving towards his car, which terrified him. He then saw a luminous form containing humans or humanoids about 3 meters high, and he observed them climbing into this object, which then took off vertically and disappeared on the horizon at high speed in a southerly direction. His colleagues were sent to the residence, and they found Zanfretta lying still on the ground in what was described as a state of shock, and a strange footprint in the shape of a horseshoe was found on the site. This story on its own would be crazy or bad enough, but according to Zanfretta, this wasn't the last time he would encounter these strange beings. In fact, a year later, on the night between the 2nd and 3rd of December 1979, Zanfretta would mysteriously just disappear, and his car would be found near Torriglia with no signs of him. And allegedly, although this was not confirmed, there was a strange mist observed around the same time. A lieutenant called Pixabay would claim that he fired a few shots at this mist, which caused part of it to disappear. But shortly after that, the mist would disappear entirely, and Zanfretta mysteriously reappeared near his car. During that time in Genoa, there were also a lot of strange blackouts, with no explanations for why they were happening. And a lot of people would call in and report seeing strange things. But back to Zanfretta, what actually happened to him? In an appearance on the Maurizio Costanzo show, he said that on the night when he first encountered these strange beings, he was taken aboard their ship and subjected to experiments. He described one where they put him on a steel bed where 6 spikes pierced his legs, sides, and arms. And those spikes would apparently draw blood from his body, which then entered some kind of strange machine. According to Zanfretta, the beings would speak to him, and they explained that they were called Dargos, and that they came from a dying planet of a 3rd galaxy called Titania. And they were seeing Earth as one of the possible planets that they could move to in the future, which is why they were there that night, to look around and see if Earth really was somewhere they could live. I guess a villa in Italy is attractive to everyone. Zanfretta would also claim that he received a gift from these beings, a transparent orb containing a golden tetrahedron that would rotate in suspension. Zanfretta would claim that he has hidden this orb in a place that only he knows about. He also said that any other being that tried to approach this orb or the area where the orb was would be electrocuted by the orb itself. Supposedly, this had happened to an unfortunate hare that accidentally got too close. Zanfretta also said that he feels physically forced to go to this area where he hid the orb at least twice a month, but he can't say why he feels that way. The existence of this orb has never been proven. Zanfretta claimed that he has tried taking a photograph of it, but the developed photograph didn't show anything except for 5 luminous points. On the 16th of November 2007, during an episode of the program Rebus Questions of Knowledge, Zanfretta would show photos and videos that had been taken of this orb. But once again, neither the photographs or the videos could prove anything as they came out completely dark. And also, supposedly since August 2008, Zanfretta is no longer able to access the place where he keeps the box with the orb inside, though he isn't sure why. The sightings of the unidentified flying objects and humanoids by Zanfretta were compiled and sent to the Genoa Magistrate Court by Brigadier Nucci on the 3rd of January 1979. However, this would all be dismissed on the 11th of January 1979 by a judge, Russo, due to a quote, lack of criminal details. What really happened that night has been a debate among the people living in the area who remembers that night. Many in the town have claimed or believe that the whole thing was nothing but an elaborate prank that no one wanted to confess to. But there are also those living in the area that believe that something really did happen. There were many other reports of people seeing strange unidentified things in the sky. For instance, the man who Zanfretta first told his story to, Antonio Nucci, would supposedly also witness some kind of UFO, but he had been, quote, advised by his command to stay silent about it, and he would only speak of his experience after he had retired from the force. Nucci is also the one who documented these 50-odd reports from inhabitants of Torriglia of strange things being seen in the sky. Zanfretta would undergo regressive hypnosis over the years, more than once. One example is by psychoanalysts Mauro Moretti and Cesare Musatti. They would have Zanfretta undergo regressive hypnosis sessions, and they would allegedly state after that declarations regarding paranormal events made during the hypnotic state were made in good faith. However, one of their colleagues would state that the statements made under hypnosis may not correspond to reality. Apparently, there was even an intrusion during one of these hypnotic sessions that may have contaminated the result. There was also some criticism aimed at the fact that there was a disconnect in the drawings that Zanfretta would make under hypnosis versus the ones he made when awake. For instance, a representative of the Italian Center for UFO Studies declared the Zanfretta case as a clear fake during a broadcast on a local station. And one of the reasons he used for this conclusion was the disconnect between the drawings. However, Moretti and Musatti stated that the fact that there was a disconnect between the drawings is nothing strange. They claimed that drawings made while awake are much less precise than those made under hypnosis. There's also the issue of regression therapy being a bit of a controversial topic. There isn't much research to support the use of it, and some experts have theorized that it could actually lead to false memories and make things worse. For instance, according to a report from the University of Baltimore Law Forum writes that the Florida Appellate Court has ruled that polygraph tests and statements made during hypnosis are inadmissible as evidence because their reliability has not been proven. And from what I could find, in Italy, the technique is also not allowed as evidence in courts. I mentioned that one of the hypnotic sessions of Zanfretta had been interrupted once, and that was apparently from an investigator by the name of Luciano Boccione, which should have made the results of that session inconclusive, to say the least. But apparently, Zanfretta had also been judged by psychiatrists who deemed him to be of sound mind. There is some information about this in English, most of it is in Italian, and there is some disconnect between what actually happened that night and what didn't happen that night. The one thing I became the most curious about when looking into this case was the orb that he was given. Mainly because there seems to be a weird connection between strange orbs and UFOs, especially metallic orbs. The most famous example of this is probably the bet sphere of Fort George Island, where a family in Jacksonville found a metal orb in the woods of Fort George Island. This ball would apparently display many strange qualities, such as humming back to music, rolling around seemingly on its own volition, changing directions and stopping suddenly. It could even vibrate and emit a high-pitched sound that made dogs whine. But as far as I could tell, it was never claimed to cause electric shocks like the one that Zanfretta had. Not only that, but the Betts family found it in the forest, while Zanfretta claimed that he was given the orb from these beings. But another thing that sets these two stories apart is there are actually pictures of the Betts sphere, while Zanfretta was completely unable to photograph or film the orb before he buried it. Let's back up a bit and look at what we do know about this case. Because realistically, there is a very strong possibility that a lot of details have been added or lost due to numerous retellings. Not to mention that a lot of information on this case is in Italian, so much may be lost in translation. For instance, while researching this case, I found a lot of accounts of what actually happened, and it seems like some people would embellish the story for whatever reason instead of sticking to whatever facts that we have. But let's look at the official report as a basis for what we do know. And from the report, we know that they did find a horseshoe-shaped footprint that was pretty big on the ground, and that an unidentified luminous flying object had been seen in the sky. and that strange lights were seen in the villa, and that's what Zanfretta was investigating. The report also mentions that Zanfretta had seen a luminous object that contained very tall humanoid figures that climbed into that object before it took off and then disappeared into the sky. And the report also mentions that Zanfretta was found motionless on the ground in a state of shock. That's the information from the official report. And based on that alone, something strange does seem to have happened that night, though it's unclear what. Some residents in the area would probably prefer to think that the whole thing was an elaborate prank that no one wanted to admit to, but there are those who believe that something strange really did happen, something that is very difficult to explain. In Italy, this case has been the subject of quite a few investigations, fictional stories, and even TV show interviews. For instance, in December 1984, a TV station would produce an investigative drama regarding this case. In 2004, a science fiction film by Massimo Morini would also mention the case. But Zanfretta himself has said that he has never benefited from any of these productions being made of his story. None of the TV shows, the interviews, the movies, he has never benefited from any of it. In fact, it's had a very negative impact on his life. For instance, his firearms license was suspended, which led him to lose his job. His marriage would fall apart, and the memories of what happened would reportedly haunt him. Then he's also faced ridicule and harassment by people, some of which would call his house at all hours simply to taunt him. So in addition to having this strange experience, Zanfretta's life has been made worse from what I could tell. But he strongly believes that he saw what he saw. And in that recent appearance on the Maurizio Costanzo show, Zanfretta would say that he never used to believe in UFOs. But then they took him. And now he not only believes, but he knows that they exist. What do you think happened that night? Do you believe in the more simplified story of strange lights being seen? Do you believe his story? Do you think that this orb actually exists?